Whether we're talking about oxygen, exercise, or diet, or any of the other strategies anyone's using for health and wellness, are you following a protocol at all? If you are following a protocol, should you follow that same protocol forever, or does that protocol need to change over time? Understanding how to manipulate protocols and develop protocols over time, all of this needs to be viewed through what's called the hormetic lens. And in this video, we're going to talk about just that. What is hormesis? How do we view these tools and devices and strategies through the hormetic lens? And how do we use that lens to develop the best protocols for the people that we're working with? The concepts around this phenomenon of plateau and/or the questions that we receive all the time on what's the best protocol for X, Y, or Z, these are really broad conversations and the answers are extraordinarily varied. But the thing that they all have in common is the fact that they're all built around what I would call the hormetic lens. And so in this video, we're going to introduce hormesis. I have spoken about hormesis in other videos, but we're going to do a dedicated introduction to what hormesis actually is. And then we're going to go through a series of videos following, describing how to view some of the main categories that we're using as health and wellness strategies through that hormetic lens. So we'll talk about hormesis as it relates to exercise. We'll talk about hormesis as it relates to contrast therapies like hot therapies and cold therapies. We'll talk about how it relates to diet variation. We'll talk about how it relates to hyperoxia and hypoxic type therapies. We'll talk about it as it relates to fasting. So we're going to take some really common, well-known strategies that we're all using or looking into using for improving our health and vitality, and we're going to look at them each through that hormetic lens throughout each of these series to understand how to start building and manipulating protocols within each category. So to start this conversation on hormesis and then how to look through the hormetic lens as we're looking into different protocols and programs that we might be using on ourselves or people that we're working with, we have to first define hormesis. And then in order to understand hormesis, we actually really need to understand stress. So let's start with a conversation around stress. Then we can understand what hormesis is. We'll describe the hormetic curve and the hormetic lens, and then we can build from there. So when I say the word stress, most people immediately think of relationships, deadlines, bills. And what that is really emotional stress. But when I say the word stress, emotional stress only makes up 1/3 of the total stress that our body is actually ever experiencing. So stress comes from 3 sources. It comes from emotional, it comes from chemical, and it comes from physical. So chemical stress is everything we put into our body. Water, food, vitamins, drugs, alcohol, toxins, all the things. Physical stress is everything we do to our body. Positions that we sleep in, positions that we sit in, the amount of exercise we get, too much, not enough, right? So what we do to our bodies ultimately builds up to the total amount of physical stress. And then emotional stress is everything that we think about. And again, that's the stress that most people think of when I even say the word stress. But we have to recognize that all 3 of those stressors play an equal role in the total stress that our body is experiencing. Within each of those 3 categories, there's also healthy stressors and unhealthy stressors. So unhealthy stress is considered distress, and healthy stressors are considered eustress, EU stress. And literally, stress is anything that causes a change inside of our body, and those stressors can come from any one of those 3 categories. Look at food for a moment. When you eat food, that's causing a change to your body. You have to chew it, you have to swallow it, you have to chemically break it down. You then have to absorb the nutrients and get rid of the waste. So there's a whole processing that food has to go through as you expose your body to it. So that is a stressor. Now, easy examples, if you ate a donut versus if you ate a salad. If you ate a donut, your body has to go through all of those same processes. If you ate a salad, your body has to go through all those same processes. But let's say the biggest difference is that salad was nutrient dense. And so even though you had to process all of that and put your body through the system to extract those nutrients, there were a lot of nutrients to extract. And so the net result of that salad, assuming it was a healthy salad and organic and not full of toxins from the environment, should be that that was a healthy choice. So that's eustress. It's a stress on the body, but it's a good stress. Versus, let's say, the donut has to process the same way. However, there's really no nutrients to pull in. It's also potentially fried, so there's sugar and unhealthy fats that are associated with that donut. And so ultimately, it's calorically dense, but it's not nutrient dense. And there's a lot of toxicity associated with that. So it caused the stress in the body and there was really no benefit. So the net stress effect of that donut would have been distress, whereas the net effect of the salad would have been eustress, okay? That's the difference between the good and the bad stress. Now, you have to evaluate your entire life through that lens of stress and understand that they're all interacting with each other. Many of you have had similar experiences. Let's say you have an argument with somebody, okay? Now there's some emotional stress being driven inside your body. You're upset, they're upset. As a result of being emotionally upset, you might turn to food. And it's likely that you're not going to turn to that salad in that moment. Maybe you're going to turn to ice cream and baked goods, as an example. So we had this negative or this unhealthy emotional stress that then led to a desire for food. And then the choice that we made when we had that desire for food was also an unhealthy stress. And so that emotional stress actually turned into a chemical stress in our body. And so they're playing off of each other and we're compounding the distress or compounding the negative stress in that moment. We could take that one even a step further. Now that you've eaten all the ice cream and the chips and the baked goods, and now you feel physically sick. And as a result of eating all that food and feeling physically sick, now there's a physical stressor that you've put on your body. And then you might even beat yourself up. Why did I do that? I'm so stupid, right? And now there's another emotional stress even compounding. So this argument led to a choice about food, led to feeling physically sick, and then led to emotionally beating ourselves up about it. And many of us end up living in this negative spiral of distress in many ways. You can also see the opposite. You could say, I had a very stressful day, all these deadlines, I have so much going on, but I'm going to make time to go to the gym today. And so you have all this emotional stress built up, but you go to the gym, you do a workout, 30 minutes, 60-minute workout. How do you feel when you leave the gym? Even though you probably haven't dealt with or actually solved any of the emotional stress that you went into the gym with, it's very likely that you feel lighter and better going into the rest of the day having done that. So you took another stressor, a physical stress, but you did the right type and the right amount of exercise that felt good for you. And as a result, you started to negate the negative effect of some of the emotional stress that you went into the gym with. Now, I'm just giving you some really basic and obvious examples, but I want you to be able to start viewing your life through this lens. Because when you understand the full spectrum of where stress is coming from, you understand that within each of the three categories of stress, there's healthy versions and unhealthy versions. Something to understand how stress affects your life, and you could start making different decisions around how to increase the healthy stressors in your life to start mitigating the effect of some of the unhealthy stressors in your life, especially when some of the sources of unhealthy stress in your life are not necessarily under your control. And so therefore, you're choosing things in your life that promote increased health to try to counteract some of the things that are outside your control. Now that we understand the full context of the word stress, when I'm using the word stress, we can now relate that to what hormesis actually is. Hormesis is a conversation about how stress could either lead to dysfunction or lead to greater resilience. And so what we have here is what we call the hormetic curve. So as we look at the hormetic curve, what we see is the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. The vertical axis is showing the overall response. Is there a response and how much of a response are we getting? While the horizontal line is showing the dose. How much of a stressor are we getting exposed to? And now you also see this horizontal line running through the middle of the graph. And what that represents is the signal or the alarm. Okay, so anything below that line isn't even registering inside your body. Anything above that line is a stressor great enough to start setting off the bells and whistles that need to go off when we're creating a stressor inside the body. And you can see this curve is starting at the lower left below that radar line. And then you see it expanding well above that line and then curving back down below towards the opposite end. And so what this is ultimately showing us is that you could have some type of signal into your body, but just like in the lower left, that signal's not even a great enough signal to set the alarm off. As the dose increases, the response starts to increase. And so as we increase along the horizontal line, we start getting a response that's coming above the alarms. as you look at that nice round curve above the midline, you start to see two areas, the beginning of which says sweet spot and the second half of which says diminishing return. What does that mean? It means that as I start to expose you to certain stressors in your body, mind you, healthy stressors, as the stress increases, the response increases. As the stress increases, the response increases. And there's this sweet spot where we get a ton of benefit from exposure to that stressor. As we move past the 50% line, and now we're starting to head down, what that's saying is there's still benefit being had, but more isn't continually increasing our response. As we get exposed to more, our response is actually starting to decrease. So we're starting to exceed our body's capacity to heal and regenerate at that time. Although there's still benefit, the ratios are now starting to become inverted. And then if we continue down that line, what you'll see is now we're actually starting to do more damage than good. So even though that thing was a healthy stress at one point, we've now done so much of that, and our body is no longer healing and recovering from the amount that we're doing. We're now breaking down faster than we can rebuild, and now we're doing more damage than good as a result of continuing to create more of a dose response. Okay, so what does all of that mean? What that means is we need to use stressors, right? Because if we're not stressing the body, then we're not changing. So if you've started to do something and you're seeing no result, you could be in that section of you're doing something, it's just not enough to really even register inside your body. Or if you've done something but then adapted to it over time, again, you started to see some benefit, the body adapted to that benefit, and now you're back below the radar line. You're plateauing. You're no longer seeing the benefits of all of the work that you're doing. And so what we need to do is we need to create a change in your body to start to stimulate some stressors, healthy stressors, to get you into that sweet spot. And as we do that, the reason that that graph at the top is starting to expand and get higher and wider is because the more you get exposed to that, the more you can tolerate. And ultimately, what I would tell you is your health is directly related to your ability to adapt to change. So what we're doing here is we're handpicking very specific stressors, trying to push you into this hormetic curve, trying to expand your height and width of that hormetic curve, making you a more resilient and more adaptable human. And as we do that, your health continues to improve month after month, year after year. Even though you're getting older, you're getting healthier. All of the different strategies for improving health and wellness could be viewed through this lens. In other words, through the hormetic lens. Are we creating enough of a stressor for you? Are we keeping you somewhere in that sweet spot up to the diminishing return? Or have we exceeded that and now you're showing other signs and symptoms as a result of pushing too hard? Or are you adapting to it too quickly and without us growing it, plateauing and starting to dip back below that line? Whether we're talking about exercise, it fits the hormetic lens. Whether we're talking about temperature contrast therapies like sauna and steam, so hot therapies, and then cryo and ice baths, cold therapies, and we're using them to ping pong between different temperature regulation in our body. That could be used through the hormetic lens. Whether we're talking about diet, many people find that their health was starting to fail. They change their diet to a very specific diet. Their health starts to improve. And so then they maintain that exact same diet indefinitely. What I'm telling you is if you do that, the improvement you saw was from stimulating the hormetic curve, but at some point your body will adapt to that and you will plateau and your health will plateau with that. And so if we're not also creating diet variation, we will get stuck and no longer see the improvements and the expansion of the hormetic curve. Same thing with fasting. I know a lot of people are fasting, intermittent fasting, block fasting, dry fasting, water fasting. There's tons of different ways to create fasting or fast mimicking stressors on our body, and they're all great, but which ones should you be doing? If you started intermittent fasting and doing an 18-hour fast every day, that might have been a huge shift for you. And so you went and you started to stimulate that hormetic curve. But it's 3 years later and you're still doing the exact same timing and the exact same windows of eating. Well, I'm sorry to tell you that if that's the case, you're no longer benefiting from that 18-hour fast the way you did for the first month or two. So learning how to manipulate your eating windows, your timelines, which side of the schedule you're using that fast, or growing from an intermittent fast into a block fast, or if you've been doing water fasts, try doing a dry fast. If you're not making those types of changes, you're not stimulating the hormetic curve any longer. One of the benefits of all of these different contrast-related therapies, or one of the benefits of constantly stimulating that hormetic curve, is that when we stimulate the hormetic curve, we release chemicals called sirtuins. Sirtuins are very specific chemical messengers that are stimulated through what we call cellular adversity. In other words, stress. So as we put different stressors on the body releases sirtuins. And sirtuins play a very specific role in cellular processes like, should the cell replicate or not? Should it become dormant and senescent? Should it actually kill itself to make room for a new cell or a stem cell to migrate in? Should it repair itself? Should it repair its DNA? Should it repair its epigenome and genetics? Should it repair its cell membrane? All of the different details around life cycle of a cell and the repair and regeneration of cells and tissues are ultimately stimulated through sirtuins, and sirtuins are stimulated through stress. Understanding that entire realm of stress that we discussed earlier in the video, understanding how to apply stressors to the hormetic curve, and understanding that you're stimulating sirtuins in that process, those are the critical concepts that I want you to gain from this video so that we can apply it to the next few videos going forward. And what I really want to do in the next series of videos is help you understand how to continually manipulate that hormetic curve using these different strategies without pushing too hard and ending up breaking down faster than you can heal, but staying above that line and growing the width and the height of the hormetic curve, improving your health month after month, year after year, and manipulate the variables that you have control over in your life to continually expand your health for decades to come. Now, it's really important, make sure that you subscribe to this channel. I don't want you to miss the next few videos in this series so that you really understand how to apply these concepts to all the other therapies and strategies you're using, either on yourself, your clients, or your patients. The rest of the series is going to talk about the different individual therapies that some of us are using and how to view them through this hormetic lens, and I look forward to seeing you in those videos.